Hey guys, tonight we're taking a gentle journey back in time, all the way to the sun-drenched banks of the Nile, where the whisper of papyrus in the breeze might just lull you into a perfect slumber. Imagine yourself there, centuries ago, perhaps reclining on a cushioned bench, feeling the cool, smooth fabric against your skin. This isn't just any fabric. It's linen, ancient Egyptian linen, a material so fine, so meticulously crafted, it practically begs to be part of your most comfortable dreams. You might think, oh, it's just cloth, but for the Egyptians, linen was everything: clothing, currency, burial, shroud, even toilet paper, though you probably wouldn't survive a day using their version of that last one. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It truly helps this little corner of the internet grow, and it tells me you appreciate these deep dives into the oddly soothing corners of history. And as you settle in, maybe let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see how far these sleepy history tales travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. We're going to unravel the secrets of how ancient Egyptians kept their linen so impossibly crisp and clean, a testament to their surprising ingenuity and meticulous nature. This wasn't just about looking good. It was about hygiene, status, and even a profound connection to the divine. You see, linen was considered pure, a gift from the gods, and its cleanliness was a reflection of one's own spiritual purity. So, while you might just toss your t-shirt in the wash, they treated their linen with a reverence that would make a modern dry cleaner blush. Historians still argue whether the crispness was purely aesthetic or if it served a practical purpose in the hot climate, perhaps aiding airflow or reducing insect pests. What is undeniable, however, is their unparalleled skill in textile production. You might be picturing rough, scratchy sacks, but their finest linen was as delicate as modern silk, almost transparent, a testament to their mastery of a fiber that seems, on the surface, rather humble. We'll start our adventure, as all good stories do, at the very beginning, with the unassuming plant that made it all possible: flax. Our story truly begins not in a grand palace, but in the fertile fields watered by the Nile, where the flax plant flourished. You see it stretching out, a sea of slender green stalks swaying gently, each one topped with delicate blue flowers that bloom for just a single day, like tiny sky-colored promises. This wasn't just any crop. It was a cornerstone of their civilization, a plant so vital it appeared in their hieroglyphs and was celebrated in their art. Imagine a farmer, millennia ago, meticulously preparing the soil after the annual inundation of the Nile, knowing that the quality of his harvest directly impacted everything from the clothes on his family's back to the bandages on a priest's mummy. The Egyptians understood that, for the finest linen, the flax needed to be harvested at precisely the right moment, not too early, which would yield weak fibers, and not too late, which would make them brittle. They'd plant the seeds in late autumn, and by spring, usually around March or April, the fields would be ready. You'd watch them carefully, scanning the stalks for that telltale golden hue near the base, a sign of maturity. This meticulous timing was crucial for achieving the long, unbroken fibers that were essential for the incredibly fine threads they were famous for. It's a bit like trying to catch that perfect moment when your toast is just golden brown, not burnt, but instead of breakfast, it's an entire textile industry hanging in the balance. The tools were simple but effective. Instead of scythes or sharp blades that might damage the precious fibers, the flax was often pulled up by the roots. Imagine the back-breaking work, bending low under the Egyptian sun, pulling stalk after stalk, ensuring each plant remained intact. This was often done by hand, sometimes with the aid of simple wooden tools to loosen the soil. You might see groups of villagers, men, women, and even children, working together in rhythmic unison, a scene that probably hasn't changed much in agricultural fields for thousands of years. This method, while labor-intensive, ensured the maximum length of fiber was preserved, which, as you'll soon discover, was absolutely key to creating that smooth, crisp linen. Historians still argue whether certain regions specialized in particularly fine flax cultivation, leading to distinct qualities of linen, or if the processing was the main differentiator. What is clear is that the sheer scale of flax cultivation required an immense amount of coordinated effort, a testament to their organized society. It's safe to say their agricultural prowess was just as impressive as their pyramid building. You can almost feel the dry dust on your fingers as the roots resist, then finally yield, bringing up the long, straight stalks, bundles of potential, luxury ready for the next crucial stage. Once the flax stalks were carefully pulled from the earth, the next phase began, retting and drying. This was where the magic, or perhaps the carefully controlled decomposition, truly started. You see the bundles of flax, neatly tied, being transported to either special retting ponds or laid out in dew-covered fields. Imagine the hushed atmosphere, the gentle lapping of water in a sun-dappled pool, or the quiet rustle of dew-laden stalks in the pre-dawn light. The goal here was to break down the pectin, a natural glue that binds the valuable fibers to the woody core of the plant. There were two primary methods, dew retting and water retting. With dew retting, the bundles of flax were spread out in thin layers on grassy fields. You'd see them glistening under the morning dew and baking under the midday sun. This natural process, alternating moisture and warmth, allowed fungi and bacteria to slowly decompose the pectin. It was a patient, passive method, often taking several weeks, and required constant vigilance to ensure the flax didn't overret and weaken the fibers. It's a bit like leaving a stubborn stain to soak overnight, except your entire livelihood depends on the exact duration of the soak. Water retting, on the other hand, was more controlled and often yielded finer fibers. The bundles of flax were submerged in shallow ponds, slow-moving streams, or sometimes even specially constructed retting tanks. You can almost smell the earthy, slightly sweet odor as the water works its way into the stalks, aiding the microbial breakdown. This method was faster, typically, taking only a few days to a couple of weeks, but it demanded even more precision. Too little time, and the fibers wouldn't separate properly. Too much, and they would degrade, becoming weak and unusable. Imagine an ancient textile master peering intently at the submerged flax, perhaps even testing a small sample by hand, trying to discern that perfect point of readiness. Historians still argue about the exact water sources preferred for retting. Did certain areas of the Nile yield better results due to mineral content, or was it purely about temperature and consistency? What's clear is that they developed an almost intuitive understanding of this delicate biological process. Once adequately retted, the flax was removed from the water or gathered from the fields and laid out to dry thoroughly under the Egyptian sun. You'd see rows and rows of flax, now brownish and somewhat brittle, laid out to bake until every last drop of moisture had evaporated, preparing them for the next stage of transformation. This drying process was just as crucial as the retting, as any residual dampness could lead to mold or further degradation of the precious fibers. With the flax stalks now perfectly retted and thoroughly dried, you're ready for the truly satisfying, if somewhat dusty, part of the process, beating and Imagine the dry, brittle flax bundles crackling faintly as you handle them. The goal now is to separate the precious bast fibers, those long, strong threads that will become your crisp linen, from the unwanted woody core, known as the shives or herds. It's a bit like trying to get the last bit of popcorn kernel out of the fluffy part, but on a much larger and more ancient scale. First came the beating. You'd see workers, perhaps with simple wooden mallets or clubs, rhythmically striking the dried flax bundles. Thwack, thwack, thwack. The sound would echo in the dusty air. This brute force method wasn't about damaging the fibers, but rather about crushing the brittle woody parts into smaller pieces, loosening their grip on the coveted inner strands. You can picture the cloud of dust and tiny fragments rising with each blow, a testament to the sheer manual labor involved. This initial beating made the subsequent separation much easier, creating a preliminary breakage of the stalks. Following the beating, the crucial step of scutching began. This involved a tool that sounds deceptively simple, a wooden blade or scutching knife. You'd take a handful of the beaten flax and hold it over a vertical wooden board or a scutching block. Then, with careful, sweeping motions, you'd strike the flax with the scutching knife, running it down the length of the fibers. Imagine the rhythmic swish chop, as the flat edge of the blade scraped away the remaining shives. It required a surprising amount of skill and precision. Too much force, and you'd break the fibers. Too little, and the woody bits would stubbornly cling on. You'd see the discarded shives piling up at the worker's feet, forming a coarse, light brown mound, while the separated flax fibers began to emerge, smoother and more refined. This process wasn't just about efficiency, it was about fiber integrity. The longer and more intact the individual flax fibers, the stronger and finer the resulting linen thread would be. Historians still argue whether different regional workshops had their own unique scutching techniques or tools that contributed to varying qualities of finished linen. What is evident is the sheer dedication to detail, even in these early, seemingly crude stages. It's a far cry from modern automated processes, where machines do all the precise work. Here, it was all down to the practiced eye and hand of the artisan, a dance between brute force and delicate touch, transforming humble plant stalks into the raw material for luxury textiles. You can almost feel the smooth, clean fibers begin to emerge in your hands, ready for their next remarkable transformation. After the meticulous beating and scutching, the separated flax fibers were still in a somewhat tangled, unruly state. Now came the crucial and incredibly skilled process of spinning the fine threads. This is where raw fiber truly began its transformation into the gossamer-thin strands that would become famous Egyptian linen. Imagine sitting beside a skilled spinner, watching their hands move with an almost hypnotic rhythm, drawing out the fibers with practiced ease. The primary tool for this was the drop spindle. You might picture a simple wooden stick with a weighted whorl at one end, and you'd be right. Yet, in the hands of an Egyptian artisan, it was capable of producing threads of astonishing fineness. You'd see them take a handful of prepared flax fibers, called a distaff, and gently begin to draw a few strands out, twisting them together. Then, with a deft flick of the wrist, they'd set the spindle rotating, letting it drop and spin as gravity did its work. As the spindle spun, it twisted the fibers together, creating a continuous thread. You'd watch as the spinner consistently fed more fibers into the twist, their fingers delicately controlling the thickness and uniformity of the yarn. The goal wasn't just to make a thread, but to make an exceptionally fine thread. Egyptian linen could be so translucent, so delicate, that it was often compared to woven air. This required immense patience and a lifetime of practice. You might see a spinner pause, holding a newly spun section up to the light, checking for any imperfections, any slight variation in thickness. Consistency was key. Historians still argue about whether the very finest threads were produced by specialized spinners, perhaps those of higher status, or if this skill was widely distributed among the populace. What is clear is that the sheer volume of high-quality linen produced suggests a society with a deep understanding of textile production and a workforce trained to a remarkably high standard. Some of the finest threads found were just a fraction of a millimeter thick, finer than modern sewing thread, which is astonishing when you consider they were made without automated machinery. It's a bit like trying to thread a needle with spider silk, but doing it consistently for hours on end. The quality of the spinning directly impacted the final feel and appearance of the fabric. A well-spun thread was strong, smooth, and even, leading to a crisp, elegant weave. A poorly spun thread, conversely, would be lumpy and weak. So, as the spindle whirled and dropped, you'd witnessed the slow, mesmerizing creation of the very essence of Egyptian linen, preparing it for the next step on its journey to crisp perfection. With spools of incredibly fine, even linen threads now ready, the journey towards crispness continues with the pivotal stage of weaving the fabric. You're now stepping into the bustling, rhythmic world of the ancient Egyptian loom. Imagine the soft clack and thud of wooden parts, the low hum of tensioned threads, as artisans meticulously interlaced warp and weft to create continuous lengths of exquisite cloth. The Egyptians primarily used two types of looms, the horizontal ground loom and the vertical loom. On a horizontal loom, you'd see the warp threads, the long foundational threads stretched out close to the ground, sometimes pegged directly into the earth. The weaver would sit or squat, leaning over the threads, passing the weft, the crosswise threads, back and forth. It's a bit like playing a giant, intricate game of pickup sticks, but with a purpose far beyond mere amusement. The vertical loom, which emerged later and became more prevalent, allowed for longer pieces of fabric and often more intricate patterns. Here, the warp threads were stretched vertically within a sturdy wooden frame, allowing the weaver to stand or sit on a stool. Regardless of the loom type, the skill involved was immense. You'd watch as the weaver, with astonishing dexterity, manipulated the heddle's devices that lifted specific warp threads to create an opening or shed through which the weft thread was passed. Then, with a beating stick or sword, they'd press the newly inserted weft thread firmly into place, ensuring a tight, even weave. The finer the thread, the more threads per inch, and the more challenging the weaving became. Some of the most delicate Egyptian linen has thread counts that rival or even surpass modern high-quality sheets. This wasn't just functional, it was an art form. Historians still argue about the exact division of labor in weaving workshops. Were men and women involved equally, or did certain tasks fall to specific genders? What is clear is that large-scale textile production was integral to the Egyptian economy, providing clothes, sails for their boats, and even materials for mummification. You might see a master weaver overseeing apprentices, their eyes keenly observing every pass of the shuttle, ensuring the consistency that was the hallmark of Egyptian linen. The slightest deviation in tension or placement could lead to an imperfection in the final fabric. So, as the rhythmic clatter of the loom fills the air, you witness the transformation of individual threads into a cohesive, elegant sheet of fabric, laying the foundation for that famed Egyptian crispness. The very structure of the weave contributed to its ability to hold a neat fold, promising a smooth finish even before any special treatment. Once the weaving was complete, you'd have a length of raw, unbleached linen fabric, perhaps a natural, slightly creamy, off-white or light brown. But to achieve that iconic, pristine whiteness, the Egyptians embarked on a meticulous process of bleaching. This wasn't about harsh, modern chemicals. It was a patient, natural endeavor, leveraging the power of the sun and simple compounds. Imagine vast stretches of land beside the Nile, covered with long sheets of linen, glistening under the intense Egyptian sun. The primary method involved repeated cycles of washing and sun exposure. You'd see the freshly woven linen taken to the river or a large washing basin. There, it would be soaked and agitated, often with the addition of a mild alkaline substance. This could be natron, a naturally occurring mineral salt, sodium carbonate, and bicarbonate found abundantly in Egypt, or plant ashes, which also contained lye. These alkaline solutions helped to loosen and remove natural impurities, oils, and residual pectin from the fibers. It's a bit like a very gentle, ancient pre-wash cycle, but instead of fabric softener, you're using something that sounds suspiciously like what you'd find at a pharaoh's spa day. After this initial washing, the linen would be spread out on clean, grassy areas or on large drying racks under the direct, unfiltered rays of the sun. You can almost feel the dry heat radiating off the ground as the sun beats down. The ultraviolet light from the sun acted as a natural bleaching agent, gradually oxidizing the remaining pigments in the flax fibers. This was a slow process, often requiring multiple cycles of washing, rinsing, and sunning over several days, or even weeks. You might see workers periodically turning the linen to ensure even exposure, much like you'd turn a pancake to get that perfect golden brown on both sides. Though with significantly higher stakes for royal garments, historians still argue whether Different regions had specific bleaching fields known for producing the whitest linen. Or if the consistent Egyptian sun made it universally achievable, what is certain is that achieving this brilliant white was a mark of purity and luxury. The whiter the linen, the more prized it was. It wasn't just about aesthetics. Cleanliness was closely linked to ritual purity, especially for priests and high-ranking officials. So, as you watch the sun slowly transform the earthy tones of raw linen into dazzling white, you're witnessing not just a cleaning process, but a purification ritual, preparing the fabric for its exalted place in Egyptian society and for the crisp finish that awaited it. With your linen now dazzlingly white, thanks to the sun and natron, you might think it's ready. But to achieve that signature crispness, that almost starched feel, the ancient Egyptians employed another clever technique, starching. This wasn't about modern aerosol sprays or highly refined chemical starches. Instead, they relied on natural, readily available sources, primarily from grains. Imagine the satisfaction of feeling a fabric that, moments ago, was merely soft, now transformed into something with a pleasing body and structure. The most common source of starch would have been wheat or barley. You'd see these grains being ground into a fine powder, perhaps then mixed with water to create a milky, viscous solution. This concoction would then be applied to the freshly washed and bleached linen. The method of application could vary. For larger pieces, you might see the linen being gently dipped into a shallow vat of the starch solution, ensuring even saturation. For smaller or more delicate items, perhaps a priest's ceremonial robe, the starch might have been carefully painted or brushed on. It's a bit like preparing a particularly finicky pastry dough, where the exact consistency of your mixture determines the final outcome. The key was to apply just the right amount. Too little, and the linen wouldn't gain that desired crispness. Too much, and it could become stiff, brittle, and uncomfortable. You'd watch as the artisans carefully wrung out excess solution, or perhaps blotted it with clean cloths, making sure the starch permeated the fibers without caking on the surface. Historians still argue about whether different concentrations of starch were used for different purposes. Perhaps a lighter starch for everyday garments, and a much heavier application for things like funerary shrouds or decorative hangings that needed to hold a precise shape. What is certain is that this step was crucial for imparting the characteristic snap to their high-quality linen. After the starch was applied, the linen would once again be laid out to dry, often in the sun. As the water evaporated, the starch molecules would bind to the flax fibers, creating a microscopic network that stiffened the fabric. You can almost feel the transformation as the limp cloth gradually becomes firmer, holding its shape with a satisfying rigidity. This natural starching process not only gave the linen its crispness, but also offered a degree of protection against wrinkles and dirt, effectively creating a natural barrier. It was a simple yet profoundly effective technique, demonstrating their intuitive understanding of material science. Long before those words even existed, with the starch now infused into the linen fibers and drying under the warm sun, the fabric would have a newfound body. But to achieve that flawlessly smooth, truly crisp finish, the ancient Egyptians employed what we might consider an early form of ironing, using smoothing stones. Forget steam irons or even clunky cast iron contraptions. Their method was elegantly simple and surprisingly effective. Imagine the quiet, focused energy of a textile worker, meticulously gliding a polished stone over a freshly starched cloth. You'd see a piece of linen laid out flat on a smooth, hard surface, perhaps a polished stone slab or a specially prepared wooden board. Then the artisan would take a smooth, rounded stone, often a piece of quartz or basalt, which had been carefully selected for its even surface and comforting weight. This stone might be naturally heated by the sun, or perhaps even gently warmed over embers, though direct heat would need to be very carefully controlled to avoid scorching the precious fabric. The worker would then press and rub this stone firmly over the linen, applying steady, even pressure. Imagine the repetitive rhythmic motion, swoosh, press, glide. As the stone moved across the starched fabric, it would effectively flatten the fibers, pressing out any remaining wrinkles and consolidating the starch within the weave. This action not only smoothed the surface, but also compacted the threads, enhancing the linen's inherent crispness and giving it a lustrous sheen. It's a bit like polishing a fine piece of furniture, where the repeated friction brings out the inherent beauty of the material. But here, it's about coaxing perfection from threads. This wasn't just about appearances. A smooth, tightly woven, and pressed fabric was also less likely to snag or pill, increasing its durability. Historians still argue about whether these smoothing stones were personal tools, passed down through families, or if specific workshops had communal sets of highly prized stones. What is clear is that the effort put into this final smoothing step indicates the high value placed on well-finished linen. You can almost feel the gentle warmth of the stone radiating into your hands as you guide it over the fabric, watching wrinkles disappear as if by magic. The result was a linen so exquisitely smooth and flat it would hold its form. Whether draped around a noble, wrapped around a mummy, or meticulously folded and stored, this painstaking attention to detail, from plant to finished fabric, truly set Egyptian linen apart. After the linen had been meticulously ironed with smoothing stones, achieving that sublime crispness and flatness, the final challenge was folding and storage. You might think it's just putting it away, but for the ancient Egyptians, who valued order and purity, this was another step in preserving the integrity and pristine condition of their valuable textiles. Imagine the quiet precision involved, ensuring that every fold was just right, protecting the fabric for future use or presentation. You'd see the freshly pressed linen, now cool and stiff, being carefully folded. Unlike modern habits of simply tossing clothes into a drawer, Egyptian linen was often folded with great care, creating sharp, precise creases. This wasn't just for aesthetics. Neat folding minimized wrinkles and helped to maintain the fabric's smooth surface. For the finest garments or ceremonial cloths, you can imagine individual items being folded in a specific manner, perhaps even with a particular symbolic significance. It's a bit like the art of Japanese furoshiki, where the folding itself is part of the beauty and function. Once folded, the linen needed to be stored in a way that protected it from dust, insects, and moisture, constant threats in their warm climate. You'd see these precious textiles placed into chests made of wood or wicker, sometimes lined with matting. These chests would be carefully sealed, perhaps with lids that fit snugly, offering a barrier against the elements. For added protection, Some linen might have been wrapped in outer layers of coarser fabric, or even placed alongside desiccants like natron to absorb any ambient humidity. Imagine the hushed reverence with which these chests were opened, revealing perfectly preserved, crisp linen within. Storage locations were also crucial. You might find linen kept in cool, dry storerooms within temples, palaces, or the homes of the wealthy. These spaces would have been designed to minimize humidity and pest infestation. Historians still argue about whether certain types of linen were stored differently based on their intended use. Perhaps everyday tunics in simpler baskets, while ritualistic shrouds were kept in specially consecrated chambers. What is clear is that the longevity of some linen fragments discovered in tombs, still relatively crisp thousands of years later, is a testament to their effective storage practices. You can almost smell the faint, clean scent of dry flax. From daily wear to the most solemn of rituals, a silent tribute to the meticulous care it received at every stage of its creation and preservation. While the focus tonight is on the crispness and cleanliness of ancient Egyptian linen, it's important to remember that not all linen remained that pristine, bleached white. Many pieces underwent further transformation through dyeing and embellishment. You see, while white linen symbolized purity, adding color and intricate designs allowed for personal expression, social distinction, and even storytelling. Imagine a bustling workshop no longer dominated by the stark white of bleached cloth, but alive with vibrant hues and the delicate strokes of a painter's brush. The Egyptians mastered various dyeing techniques using natural pigments. Observe dyers carefully preparing solutions from plants, minerals, and even insects. For instance, madder root provided beautiful reds and oranges, while indigo imported or derived from local woad yielded deep blues. Yellows could come from saffron or weld, and greens often resulted from combining blue and yellow dyes. The process involved soaking the linen in these dye baths, often for extended periods, to ensure the color permeated the fibers evenly. You can almost smell the earthy, sometimes pungent aromas of the natural dyes mingling in the air. It's a bit like a giant, ancient tie-dye session, but with far greater precision and purpose. Beyond solid colors, many textiles were adorned with intricate patterns. This could involve tapestry weaving, where different colored threads were woven together to create designs directly on the loom. You'd see skilled weavers meticulously changing shuttle colors, building up complex scenes or geometric motifs thread by thread. Another significant technique was painting or stenciling directly onto the finished linen. Imagine an artist with a steady hand and a keen eye, applying pigments with brushes made from reeds or plant fibers, transforming a blank canvas of white linen into a narrative scene or a repeating decorative pattern. This was particularly common for funerary cloths and wall hangings, where detailed depictions of gods, rituals, or daily life were desired. Historians still argue about the extent to which dyeing was a specialized craft, separate from weaving, or if integrated workshops handled both processes. What is certain is that the artistry displayed in these colored and embellished linens is astounding. You might see a fine tunic adorned with delicate floral patterns or a ceremonial banner depicting mythical creatures, each detail carefully rendered. While these dyed pieces might not have retained the same level of crispness as the untreated white linen due to the dye process itself, they added a rich tapestry of color and meaning to the Egyptian world, showcasing another facet of their remarkable textile mastery. They prove that their appreciation for linen extended far beyond mere function, having explored the intricate process of creating, bleaching, and even coloring Egyptian linen. Let's now consider its sheer versatility and the linen's varied uses across all strata of society. You see, this wasn't just a single type of fabric. It was a spectrum, ranging from the roughest sacking to the sheerest, most ethereal cloth. Imagine the bustling markets, filled with bundles of linen destined for every conceivable purpose, reflecting its fundamental role in daily life. At the coarse end of the spectrum, you'd find rough, unbleached linen used for utilitarian purposes. This might include sturdy sails for boats, which needed to withstand the winds of the Nile, or durable sacks for grain storage, protecting precious foodstuffs from pests and moisture. You might also see it used for simple ropes or cords, or even as a basic filter in brewing beer. This coarser linen wouldn't have been subjected to the same meticulous smoothing and starching as its finer counterparts. Its value lay in its strength and practicality. It's a bit like comparing your comfy, worn-out denim jeans to a perfectly pressed tuxedo. Both serve a purpose, but their journey and end state are vastly different. Moving up the scale, you'd encounter everyday clothing for the common people. This would still be linen, but perhaps not as finely spun or as brilliantly white as that of the elite. Simple tunics and kilts would have been ubiquitous, offering breathable comfort in the hot climate. These garments would have been washed regularly, but the crispness might have been achieved through simpler methods, perhaps just line drying in the sun rather than elaborate smoothing. You can imagine the gentle rustle of these simpler linens as people went about their daily chores in the fields or by the river at the pinnacle. However, was the incredibly fine, sheer, and often translucent linen reserved for the wealthy, the priests, and the pharaohs. This was the linen that truly earned Egypt its textile reputation. These delicate fabrics were used for exquisite garments, perhaps layered to create flowing robes, or as bedding that promised cool comfort on warm nights. You might see it used for mummy wrappings, hundreds of yards carefully wound around the deceased, signifying purity and readiness for the afterlife. Historians still argue whether the finest royal linen was produced in controlled workshops or by particularly skilled independent artisans. What is undeniable is that the sheer variety of linen, from coarse to gossamer-thin, speaks volumes about the Egyptians' deep understanding of their most vital plant fiber. It was a material woven into the very fabric of their existence, serving both the humblest needs and the loftiest spiritual aspirations. Given the wide range of linen qualities and uses, it's no surprise that social status and linen were inextricably linked in ancient Egypt. You could often discern a person's standing in society simply by observing the quality, cleanliness, and even the sheer volume of the linen they possessed or wore. Imagine walking through an ancient Egyptian town, your eyes subtly evaluating the crispness and fineness of every garment you see. Much like we might size up someone's designer clothes or watch today. For the vast majority of common laborers and farmers, their linen would have been practical and durable. You'd see them in relatively coarse, sturdy tunics, perhaps unbleached or only minimally whitened. These garments were designed for work, for enduring the sun and dust of daily life. They would have been washed, of course, but the focus was on cleanliness and longevity rather than pristine crispness. It's a bit like the difference between your everyday work boots and a pair of highly polished dress shoes. Both are footwear, but their purpose and care are distinctly different. As you moved up the social ladder, the quality of the linen dramatically improved. Scribes, artisans, and middle-ranking officials would wear finer, whiter linen, likely enjoying the benefits of more consistent bleaching and perhaps even some rudimentary starching. Their garments would appear neater, less prone to wrinkles, signaling a life that afforded them more leisure and less manual labor. You can almost feel the gentle swish of their slightly crisper tunics as they move through the marketplaces or administrative buildings. At the very pinnacle of society, the nobles, priests, and of course, the pharaoh and his family, linen, reached its zenith of luxury. This was the linen spun so finely it was almost transparent, bleached to an astonishing white, and meticulously starched and smoothed to a crisp perfection that would make a modern dry cleaner weep with joy. You'd see them in multiple layers of this exquisite fabric, draped and folded with an elegance that conveyed their immense wealth and power. Historians still argue about whether the very finest linen was exclusively for royal use or, if wealthy, private citizens could commission similar quality if they had the resources. What is clear is that owning vast quantities of high quality, perfectly maintained linen was a definitive marker of elite status. It wasn't just clothing. It was a visible statement of purity, prestige, and prosperity, a silent language spoken through fabric. The crispness wasn't merely a comfort. It was a carefully cultivated symbol beyond its practical and social significance. Linen held profound spiritual significance for the ancient Egyptians, particularly in the realm of death and the afterlife. You see, the meticulous care given to linen, from its pristine whiteness to its crisp finish, was deeply intertwined with their beliefs about purity, resurrection, and eternal life. Imagine the hushed reverence in a bebalming workshop where perfectly prepared linen awaited its most sacred purpose. The most famous spiritual use of linen, of course, was in mummification. When a person died, especially someone of wealth or importance, their body would undergo an elaborate preservation process, and linen was absolutely central to this. You'd witness skilled embalmers meticulously wrapping the deceased's body in countless layers of fine linen bandages. Each strip, often pre-starched and smoothed, was carefully wound, creating a protective cocoon that ensured the body's integrity for the journey to the afterlife. This wasn't just about preserving the physical form. It was about symbolically purifying and preparing the individual for their eternal existence. It's a bit like swaddling a newborn for comfort and protection, but on a spiritual scale for eternity. The purity of linen, especially its bleached white form, made it the ideal material for these sacred rituals. It was seen as clean, uncontaminated, and a suitable conduit for the soul's transition. You can almost feel the dry, crisp texture of the linen strips as they are carefully applied, layer upon layer, transforming the deceased into an eternal, perfect form. Often, these bandages would be adorned with amulets and protective spells, written directly onto the linen or placed between the layers, further emphasizing its sacred role beyond mummification. Linen was used for the clothing of priests during religious ceremonies, again emphasizing its connection to purity and the divine. You might see a high priest, clad in layers of immaculately white, crisp linen, conducting rituals in a temple, his garments rustling softly as he moves. Historians still argue whether the quality of the linen used for mummification directly impacted the deceased's standing in the afterlife, or if the sheer act of wrapping in linen was sufficient. What is clear is that the consistent use of linen in funerary and religious contexts underscores its profound symbolic meaning, a material that bridged the gap between the earthly and the eternal, helping the deceased to achieve a beautiful and complete existence in the field of reeds. The crispness, the cleanliness, the meticulous preparation of the linen wasn't just about earthly vanity. It was a deeply spiritual act as our journey through the world of ancient Egyptian linen draws to a close. We can look back and appreciate the enduring legacy of linen and the remarkable quality it represents. You've seen how an unassuming plant, through a series of meticulous, labor-intensive steps, was transformed into a fabric that was not only essential for daily life, but also deeply interwoven with their social structure and spiritual beliefs. Imagine that same sun setting over the Nile, casting long shadows over fields that once hummed with the work of flax cultivation, and how the echoes of that ancient industry still resonate today, even thousands of years later. Archaeological discoveries continue to reveal linen fragments that retain surprising strength, color, and even that characteristic crispness. You might see a piece of burial linen carefully unwrapped from a tomb, still holding its structure, a tangible link to a civilization long past. This longevity is a testament to the quality of their raw materials, the skill of their artisans, and their sophisticated techniques for processing, finishing, and storing the fabric. It makes you wonder how much of our own fast fashion textiles will survive even a fraction of that time. The innovations developed by the ancient Egyptians for linen production, particularly their understanding of retting, spinning fine threads, bleaching, and even the simple act of smoothing with stones, laid foundational knowledge for textile production that persisted for millennia. While modern technology has brought automation and new materials, the fundamental principles of transforming plant fibers into wearable fabrics still owe a debt to these early pioneers. You can almost hear the soft rustle of an ancient linen tunic as a gentle reminder of their enduring influence. Historians still argue about whether their meticulousness was driven more by practical needs in a hot climate, a cultural obsession with purity, or simply an innate drive for perfection in craftsmanship. What is undeniable is that Egyptian linen stood apart. It wasn't just a fabric, it was a symbol of their ingenuity, their dedication to craft, and their profound connection to the natural world. So as you drift off, perhaps imagining the cool, crisp touch of perfectly finished linen, remember that you've touched upon a thread of history that continues to amaze and inspire. Their linen truly was a masterpiece, not just of textile art, but of human dedication. The sun dips lower now, casting long, fading shadows across the ancient landscape. The soft breeze that rustled through the flax fields centuries ago now whispers gently at your window. Imagine the quiet hum of the ancient world settling down for the night, the distant sounds of the Nile flowing peacefully, carrying whispers of history downstream. Let the steady rhythm of time, the meticulous work of hands long past, and the silent strength of ancient fibers lull you deeper into comfort. Feel the last remnants of any waking thought soften and dissipate, like the last ripple on a calm pond. Your mind, now a vast, tranquil space, is ready to embrace the quiet stillness of sleep. The history has unfolded, the story told, and all that remains is the soothing quiet